Welcome everyone to our ISDA webinar on common domain model, specifically around digital documentation and how we reduce onboarding time and resources in that area. I am David Schoen, I'm Director of Product Data and Digital here at ISDA, and I apologise to anybody who registered specifically to see Amy moderate this. I'm afraid you are stuck with me. I am delighted to be joined by my colleague Vernon Alden-Smith, Director of Collateral Initiatives, also Wassel Damak, Director for Collateral Management, and Asma Belgaid Hassin, Deputy Director for Product Management for Colleen Product, both from VMEG. Okay, so like I said, I'm delighted to be here with some CDM collateral visionaries who've been working on some ideas and actually putting them into action. If Vernon, could we start with you taking us through the common domain model, CDM, and how it has come from its initial idea to this reality, please?
Sure, thank you, David. So yeah, it's a good place to start in explaining what the common domain model is. So the common domain model is a standardized machine readable and machine executable data model that represents financial products, trades in those products, and the life cycle events of those trades, including collateral agreements, how we represent collateral assets for eligibility terms, and other collateral processes. So the CDM is basically a very large data dictionary of common standards. So what is it for? So development of the CDM in the financial industry, it basically promotes transparency, efficiency, and innovation, and it can bring significant benefits to market participants and regulators. So the CDM, in a nutshell, enables interoperability between systems and services, removing the burden of setting up connections to different systems and entities, and allowing the groundwork for better STP. So moving away from understanding the many forms of business logic that exists, maintaining mapping translations for multiple relationships. We all know that's a headache and can cause many inefficiencies in end-to-end processes. So the CDM will speed up development of new solutions for the market by allowing providers to focus on what they specialise in rather than requiring them to interpret and represent market events and process them individually. And the CDM is also being used to increase automation in collateral management processes that you'd be interested in today to improve efficiency, reduce the time it takes to get a client on board, their relationship up and running and into action on a collateral system, for example. So CDM has been going for quite some time now, since around 2016, 2017. I joined ISDA in 2019 and started to work on the CDM project. But as time has progressed, the other trade associations have joined ISDA in this journey. Both ISLA and ICMA are part of the CDM journey, and the whole governance structure is with FINOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation. So this allows for industry development solutions and mutualised investment where all the trade associations and their members, and it's open to the whole community, it's not just members of the trade associations, can work together and build the CDM in the different areas. And I think we'd all agree that there's a natural crossover in processes for collateral between derivatives, securities lending and repo. There's all commonality in the legal agreements that drive collateral process, and there's also process similarities in how we assess collateral for eligibility, process margin calls and settlement, etc. So just a bit of a historical overview on how the CDM has developed over these years for collateral management between trade associations, at ISDA in particular. We now represent in the CDM quite a number of credit support annex for different published years, covering both initial margin and variation margin. I believe there's about 25 initial margin documents represented in the model. New generation documents, around 5 2016 VM CSAs, and we're currently working on closing the gap on the 94-95 legacy CSA that's currently in development. And we're probably about 70-80% through of that work already. We also developed CDM to represent eligible collateral, so how we represent assets, issuers, maturity profiles, HC ratings and treatments such as haircuts and concentration limits, etc. And also areas we've looked at is margin call data and cash collateral interest terms and processes. Now today's webinar will focus on VMEG's use case, which is the first implementation of CDM for collateral documentation. So I'll hand back to David.
Thanks, Vernon. So feels like it's been quite a long time getting to this point, but it's good to see our first CDM collateral implementer for MEG. Wassel, can you share a bit of MEG's history, your CDM involvement, and including why your firm thinks that the resource investment is important and beneficial?
Thank you, David. Thank you for having us on this webinar. So I think that, at least there are two drivers that I would like to mention behind our involvement and investment in CDM. The first one is that we are promoting a number of collateral solutions, and those solutions, they are a big consumer of data. And the more data is normalized, the more the data is standardized, the less we will have operational frictions at the back end on the downstream processes. So meaning that we consuming data that has a certain level of standardization will ensure a certain level of quality of that data, exhaustivity of that data, and that makes sure that the processes are automated after that. So this is the first, let's say, generic, reason behind our involvement. The second one is that if you look at it, all the investments done in the IT around collateral management, those IT investments, they are about three main drivers. You have, of course, the compliance to regulation. You have as well how to support businesses in generation of new revenues, etc. And you have also how to achieve better efficiencies to secure better margins and better profitability. And within this last, driver, you have many processes that have been identified as time-consuming with a manual work. And one of them is about legal data management. So you have different teams, you have the lawyers, you have a lot of usage of the PDFs. You have all the relationships with the operations, how to translate that into machine-readable format, etc. So all that is a heavy process. And when we talked with Vernon and the team, I think 4 years ago, about the ambition of having ISDA create in which you can execute, negotiate and execute electronically your CSAs, and that will flow without any, intervention automatically to Colleen, our collateral management solution, where you can have potentially an approval step or authorize or whatever, and then it's immediately available for margining and for to receive the data for trading and margining. That's, I think, that ambition 4 years ago. We immediately subscribed to that because we had behind behind that we have seen how will our clients and the industry, generally speaking, will reduce the onboarding cost of those agreements and all those relationships. And, that ambition today is a reality. And, discussing with certain clients that began testing that, they said that they have reduced the onboarding time to move from hours and days to minutes. So it's really worth the investment, and it's something that we will continue to invest in.
Hours and days to minutes is quite a saving there. Looks like we've managed to realize that reality of the ambition. You mentioned ISDA Create there. Vernon, can we take a look at the big picture and fill us in on how we go from ISDA Create through their contract lifecycle management strategy and then downstream? And then perhaps we'll have Asma give us a walkthrough of the Colleen use case.
Sure, thanks, David. So firstly, I just wanted to kind of show you how the structure in the CDM enables us to, develop data standards for legal agreements. So firstly, the CDM model will allow you to have a base structure. So common things such as the names of counterparties, the type of document, the governing law, the publisher, the vintage, and dates such as agreement and effective date and agreement. Those can all be normalized in the CDM. So there's one structure to use for those for the industry. And this standard structure, for instance, you can identify a party using an LEI with a name, but that structure, you can use that CDM one and only structure to detail that. Identify the agreement terms for each agreement type. So if it's a CSA, if it's a CTA, it's a security agreement, a GMSLA, it will have clauses modeled to handle those and those common clauses and all the outcomes of those. And these can be prioritized in the CDM to focus on operational clauses needed for in collateral systems for day-to-day processes. But the CDM also offers open data string flexibility for more bespoke language as well. So you can digitize a majority of the interesting parts of the agreement that's needed on a day-to-day basis. So you can see here, you can convert, for example, one use case, a PDF document from its paper form into a structured digital data representation using the CDM, and that can be more easily machine readable and consumable by systems and computers and collateral systems, for example. Just some examples here, and these are actually taken from the ISDA Create test data. These are actually CDM extracts of CSAs that show you common parts of those outcomes, such as the contractual parties, test examples, rounding of an agreement, the custodian, dispute resolution, times. These can all be captured in a standard way using the CDM data types and attributes. And this slide kind of demonstrates these use cases, in particular the ISDA Create one. ISDA Create is already in production for around 10 IM CSAs. They can be negotiated through ISDA Create platform and extracted after execution from ISDA Create to be consumed as CDM. So they can be, the API is enabled to produce CDM versions of those documents. There's also other use cases such as hard copies, unstructured soft copies. Artificial intelligence can be used to read key data from those paper documents and convert it into one standard structure using the CDM. And also vendor solutions can implement mapping translations to enable them to talk CDM to other solutions and counterparties and end users. So therefore, different institutions can exchange this information more effectively using that interoperability, using that one data standard. So vendors, counterparties, custodians, and others can exchange that information. And as we could all agree, that brings many use cases and benefits that are listed here on this slide. And obviously, we've just been discussing today. So the ISDA Create use case is already enabled. It's already available from the ISDA Create platform. But there, as this slide demonstrates, there are other use cases outside of that using that CDM standard.
So Asmo, once that document's been put into the CDM format and the JSON message generated, what can a user do with that in Colleen?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Vernon. So in order to integrate this CDM JSON file, we use an internal tool that is part of our Colleen suite. It's named Colleen Broker. So in the broker, we have configured the mapping between the different fields of the CDM JSON file and Colleen fields. The integration process involves different key steps: ingesting the JSON file, validating its format, transforming it into our Colleen proprietary format, and finally feeding this data into Colleen for further processing. And all these steps are done automatically in less than a second. So let's dig into these steps. So the process starts with the arrival of this CDM JSON file. So this file is saved in a specific folder, which is dedicated to similar CDM JSON files. Then the Colleen Broker has a listener for this folder, and it will continuously monitor for new files. And as soon as a new JSON file is detected, it will trigger the flow in process. So this automated mechanism will ensure that no files are missed and that the data ingestion begins promptly as soon as a file is saved. Then this Colleen Broker will log any event for traceability, providing a clear record of when and how data enters the system. So once the JSON file is detected, it will undergo a validation check. So during this check, the broker will parse the file and validates that it conforms to the expected schema and format. So this will involve checking that all required fields are present, ensuring that data types match the expected values, and validating the overall structure of the JSON. For example, a field designated for numerical values, if it contains some text, it will trigger a validation error, and this error will be logged into the broker dashboard. So after the JSON file passes the validation, so it's a valid file, the next step is transformation. So this step involves converting the JSON data into Colleen's proprietary format. So we use a pre-configured mapping that will align the JSON keys with the fields in our internal data model. So this transformation process generates a new file that is in Colleen proprietary format. This file will serve as a standardized input for further processing. Each of these three steps, as I said, will be, their results will be logged into the broker dashboard. So once transformed, the data is ingested into Colleen via our agreement API, creating a new agreement that is in draft status. So this draft status is important as it provides a preliminary stage where the data can be reviewed and adjusted. The agreement is pre-populated with the fields based on the JSON, CDM JSON data, streamlining the process for users and saving time. At this point, a user can look for this agreement and can enrich this agreement by adding additional information such as settlement instructions or any specific terms that were not included in the initial JSON file. Following this enrichment and depending on the configuration in Colleen, where we can optionally enable 4 eyes or even 6 eyes validation, the agreement undergoes this validation process, which involves a second or even a third person reviewing the data for accuracy and compliance. Once the agreement is approved and passes this validation, it is moved to an approved status. And this is a final stage where the agreement is live and ready to be included in the daily margining process, where it can receive trades, it can receive market data, and it can start the collateral margining workflow. So in summary, our automated workflow for integrating CDM JSON file into Colleen ensures seamless data integration, significantly saving time and reducing manual interventions and errors.
Great, thanks, Asma. So I think it's probably appropriate to take some questions from the audience at this point. So I have one here, one here for Vernon. Vernon, how many firms are implementing the CDM for collateral use cases at this point?
I would say there's currently around 10, 11 firms that are actively working towards CDM collateral use cases that spans across documentation use cases. Those are looking to represent eligible collateral in a standard way. 3 of these are in production, obviously including ISDA Create and Vermeg. But I'd say that we're also speaking to new members on a weekly basis that are interested in CDM. There's probably an equivalent number, 10 or 11 other firms that we, are very close to committing to a CDM project, but closely following what others are doing, what's going into production. So I think now we're seeing some of those production use cases become reality. I believe that now the more and more will come to start to think about using CDM once they start to see the benefits of using CDM.
Understood. Faisal and Asma, there's a question here on what advice you have for other technology providers and end users who want to get involved with CDM's open source initiative.
I think that yes, there is a momentum now. There is a critical mass of adopters, and it's time to move quickly in that investment. Now, the way it should be done, it should not jeopardize the IT stack of the clients. So as Asma was saying, the way we have done it is that we are using a component that Asma was describing by Colleen Broker. And this component is a connector that can sit on the top of any collateral management system. So here we have implemented the case with Colleen, but we can also implement the case with other collateral management system, with legacy systems, where there is a configuration to be done, and then you can consume the data, parse it, transform it, enrich it, and then make it available in the format that can be ingested by the collateral management solution. So the way it should be done, it should not it should be done in a way where it can sit on the top of existing legacy infrastructure.
Vernon, another one for you. Are there any new CDM collateral use cases currently being discussed?
Yes, I mean, there's new topics coming up all the time. I mean, currently we're looking at starting to explore collateral substitutions workflow. We've heard from many members, not just from ISDA, but at ISLA as well. We understand that there are inefficiencies and manual processes related to collateral substitutions. We're looking at ways that CDM can possibly assist with using some data standards. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that the CDM has coverage for how we represent collateral, because that could be one element of that, how we represent collateral assets and details of their eligibility terms, but also margin call data, and cash collateral interest. So all these different components and elements of the legal agreement could all, feed into that collateral substitution workflow. It's relatively early stages. We do have a working group today, the CDM collateral working group, where we'll be discussing with members, just trying to identify some of the common pain points, but is an area we're looking to think about where we can use CDM to solve some of those problems.
And one for all of you. Can bond or equity lifecycle events be handled in CDM or in Colleen? And if so, how?
I can take it from Colleen perspective. So Colleen is a collateral management system. So all the trades, when they arrive to Colleen, we take a copy of the trades to be collateralized. And then we manage, of course, all the equities and bonds as a collateral asset. But then those trades, of course, if there is a common domain model format for those trades, for their events life cycles, all that will help in standardizing the consumption of such data, and will reduce the cost of building, let's say, specific connectivities to different trading systems from which we consume this data.
From a CDM perspective, there's a full list of all of the events that CDM supports on the cdm.finos.org website. So if you want to see coverage of transactions, trade types and products and so on, as well as events, that's listed there. I know that ICMA, one of the associations involved, covers bonds, and are looking at their bond data taxonomy and how that fits into CDM. And I understand that obviously bond lifecycle events will be part of that, but I recommend contacting your ICMA representative if you want to discuss bonds in more detail. I'm just looking at the time. I need to move on. There's a few more questions in the question and answer box, so we'll endeavor to actually get you some written answers after this. But I'm going to use one as a segue into the next section that we had planned. So, Vernon, there's a question here around whether anyone can join the working groups. So, can anybody join the CDM collateral working group? How do firms get involved? How do they learn more?
Sure, I can take that one. Thanks, David. And actually, there's some information on the next slide. So there's a few things here I wanted to share with those that are on the webinar. Firstly, I'll take that working group question. So there's a number of CDM working groups covering many different topics, products, digital regulatory reporting. But for collateral in particular, we have the CDM collateral working group that's hosted by Finos, completely open to everybody. You don't necessarily have to be a member of any of the trade associations to join that working group. You can join that, and obviously many collateral topics are discussed on there, not just ones related to ISDA, but ISLA and ICMA will also bring topics related to securities lending and the repo markets as well. As I said, today there is a working group call at 3:00 London time today, and we're discussing the substitution workflow and also discussing some other topics that ISDA are bringing along, because they recently did a survey that had high scoring in collateral efficiencies for CDM. So that's on today's working group. There is a ISDA only working group called the ISDA CDM Legal Agreement Working Group that's on this slide here. The links are on here to join these working groups. So this particular working group, because it focuses on the specific clauses of the CSA, the master agreement, areas like that, it needs to be under the ISDA banner. So that particular working group is only open to ISDA members. But if you're an ISDA member, you can easily register using the committee's dashboard, searching for the working group name and registering that way. That particular working group is currently focusing on the 94-95 CSA. Working group activities paused through the summer, looking to restart in September. We're actually looking at contributing 20 clauses of those agreements at the moment. So quite a lot going on those working groups. As I say, there's some other links on this slide on the left-hand side, other CDM-related working groups. The FINOS working groups cover many different topics, and there's other working groups, ISDA, ISLA, and ICMA that they run related to CDM as well. But also wanted to draw this to everyone's attention. We do have an ISDA CDM Collaterals Initiatives page that can be accessed through a link on here. I believe the materials will be sent as a follow-up with a recording, so you can access all this information. We've recently published a CDM Collateral Startup Guide because we recognise that people were having difficulty in understanding what CDM can do, the power of CDM. So it has a number of comprehensive modules, 6 modules in total, covering introduction to the CDM, how to access it, how it works, how it can be used. It goes into details of the collateral use cases specifically, and then it has advanced features on how you can map to the CDM and more technical. It answers some of the more technical questions you may have. I do have in the appendix of this presentation, I won't go through them all in detail, but there's a QR code that takes you straight to the guide, and there is also some information here on what the contents are of each of the modules, and then there's some snapshot information taken from the actual modules themselves that show you some of the content. So describing different forms of legal agreement, how the CDM can be used to develop legal agreements, which we've gone through today, and other information about how that's in the CDM, different areas of CDM. Then it goes into other different use cases, how the model can be used and extended into a UI we've developed for eligible collateral purposes. So quite a lot of information. As I say, I won't go through this in detail. This is all available if you're able to download the models directly from the ISDA website, and you can use them and look at them in your own time, and it will answer hopefully all the questions that you may have. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Ferdinand. So I am going to give Meg the last word. So Russell, we've talked a lot, but it's been primarily around initial margin CSAs. What else has for Meg got planned to implement with CDM?
Yeah. So CDM, connector for us, and CDM compliance is a journey. We'll continue investing in that. So there is a roadmap to extend to other types of collateral agreements like JMRAs, JMSLAs. There's also in the roadmap the ingestion of the eligibility collateral schedules. And we are looking to this as a wider initiative where we have other solutions at Vermeg, like the regulatory reporting solution that is looking to ingest as well CDM formats. So it's a journey that will continue, and we'll be following all the work done with the different working groups, with ISDA and the other associations to continue on this. The way we have done it, by choosing that architecture with a component that will allow evolutions at reduced cost, will allow us to invest more and more in the CDM compliance.
Sounds good. Okay, so I believe we will be sharing a recording of this afterwards. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm sure the deck will be made available. If not, the slides I know that Vernon shared are largely can be found in the CDM overview deck, which is on cdm.finos.org as well. So it leaves only for me to say thank you to Vernon, Asma, and Vasil for sharing your insight, sharing the story. I'm sure that you are comfortable with people reaching out to you directly if they've got further questions. And look, I encourage everyone to try the startup guide. It's very good. Even I can understand it. And if you're not already on the CDM collateral working groups, please do join them. And I look forward to seeing you participate there. Thank you all.